Hi everyone. Welcome back. If you're joining us from the original building a website from start to finish, I was going to continue on with that series. We were getting to lesson 22, 23, somewhere around there, and I made the decision to kind of reboot the series and not necessarily start from scratch, but start more from a development point of view. So I still recommend that you watch the building a website from start to finish series and then move on to this one. If you already have web design experience, well then you could most likely go ahead and start with this one. But I felt there was more design elements that were going to get in the way of getting the point across and getting the knowledge to you guys. Not that a robust design is going to hinder web development. I feel I can teach just a little bit better if we kind of start from scratch. So we'll start with a little more minimal design, and that way we can start talking about dynamic stuff right away. And if you're joining us from the last series, this will be kind of a recap of the last videos. I just wanted to talk quickly about some of the languages and technologies involved in dynamic web development. I say languages and technologies because not everything we do here is a language. For instance, PHP, that is a language. Ajax is not a language. It is more of a technology or an idea. So in this series we're going to look at PHP and MySQL. PHP being the main language we're going to use to make dynamic websites. And MySQL is the database that we'll be using to bring dynamic content into the website. And we'll get into that a little bit further. JavaScript is a client-side language, which I'll explain the difference between client-side and server-side languages here soon. Ajax, like I said, is more of a technology, not even necessarily a technology, but more of an idea. It's the combination of using things like JavaScript and XML or JSON and other element or other technologies or languages to get a instant result without having to refresh your page, reload the page, thus giving it kind of the look and feel of either a Flash application, which is kind of being phased out, or a desktop application in general, which is kind of the new future here. You hear cloud technology all the time. Ajax is going to play a major role in allowing the cloud idea to move forward and become kind of a general household name. You'll start seeing a lot of things changing as this whole cloud concept and making web applications and websites act more like desktop applications moves forward. As I said, I would discuss a little bit of the difference between server and client side. PHP and MySQL are server-side languages because they are installed and run on the server. And the client-side languages, JavaScript, XML, JSON, etc., those are handled by your browser on your local machine. And when I say you, I would mean you, the user, not the developer. Although, granted, if you were looking at a website as a developer, these are happening on your computer, they would be considered client-side. So what I want to do is kind of walk you through this quick and dirty diagram to give those who don't necessarily grasp the concept yet of what I mean by client and server. So as I mentioned, the client is considered the user's computer, or even in this particular case, as you watch my video, you would be considered the client. Your machine is the client. Your browser is the client. We then have your ISP, or your internet service provider, whoever that is, whether it be some big cable company, your phone, cable, DSL, whatever. However you connect to the internet, whatever service allows you to take your machine, your client, and get to the internet. And then we have our server. And our server could be anything from the computer sitting next to me, which is my home server, that is connected to the internet and runs just like any other website hosting server, or a room full of servers that you see on TV and things like that, and documentaries, or whatever. So again, just to recap, the client handles the browser, JavaScript, JSON, XML, things like that are all run on the client. And on the server, we run things like Apache, which is the actual server software. Not the only server software, but a very, very popular one, mainly because it's free and it's open, and pretty well maintained and documented. PHP is the language we're going to use. It's not the only language. There's other languages like ASP, Ruby on Rails, things like that. In this series, we're going to be using PHP. And then MySQL, or MySQL, depending on how you like to pronounce it. That is the database that we use to store our information. PHP accesses the database and allows us to pull dynamic content, which will make more sense to you here soon. Ajax kind of fits in the middle there. The reason I say that is we're using things like JavaScript to do things behind the scenes. Because though JavaScript, XML, and JSON are our client-side languages, we still need to get dynamic content from somewhere. And the magic of Ajax is that it allows us to use things like JavaScript to make a call to the server and grab data, put it into a format that the browser can read, such as XML or JSON. And when I mean the browser, I actually mean JavaScript or something, another server-side or client-side language, which allows us to give that feel that we don't have to reload the page every time we want new content to show up. And a perfect example of this is Google right now, depending on how you have it set up. When you start typing in letters, you'll notice automatically results starting to show up. You don't have to wait for your page to reload or anything like that, or you don't have to hit go or search. Things are already starting to pop up on the page and change as you change what you're typing. That is Ajax. That is JavaScript making calls behind the scenes to the server to locate results related to what you're typing in and changing elements on the page, such as the search results. And some of you who are a little more newer to all this stuff might not even realize how great this is and how important this is. Up until not that many years ago, we had to rely on technology like Flash, which was just a whole new monster, something else you had to learn. It was expensive for customers to hire us to build because there was a lot to it. It was great technology, but Ajax has kind of taken over and allowed us to do things with the same technologies we already know. Thus, noticing the popularity of that and Flash kind of going by the wayside. So what happens when you load, let's say, the digitalcraft.com as we see on the client's computer? We first, your computer first makes a call to your ISP to connect to the internet, and then from there, the internet or your ISP connects to the server related to that domain name. Looks for the server, which a domain name is actually just a pretty name for an IP address, a series of numbers, 111.11.11.1, something like that, is the actual ID or location, address, whatever you want to call it, of your website or your server. And we use the domain names, the digitalcraft.com, google.com, youtube.com, etc. to make it easier to remember. So it will go to the server, find the digitalcraft.com's account on that server, and load the correct web page. So it'll load all that information, head back to the ISP, and then display the data that is pulled from the server. Now really quick, I want to talk about servers. As I mentioned already, I have a server here sitting next to me. It's just a Windows machine. It's an old Compaq. It doesn't have a lot of juice. It's just for testing. So the question comes up, do you use a local or remote server? And this totally depends on your budget and really what you're going for. A local server is just a computer with an operating system, some server software, and an internet connection. That's all you really need to build a local server. Sometimes the operating system and the server software are kind of one and the same, depending on if you get Windows Server OS or something like that. A remote server is most commonly referred to a hosting account. A hosting account is kind of the most basic account you can get. Sometimes they're free, sometimes they're extremely cheap, and they give you unlimited resources. These have their drawbacks, which we'll get to some other time. The next step up is what we'd call a virtual private server, which the hosting companies kind of, in layman's terms, would take one server, one machine, and kind of cut it up into a couple different servers. So it's virtual. It's not an actual full server for you, but the machine is set up to give you X amount of resources and act almost, I'd say probably 90% like a dedicated server, which dedicated server is one whole machine dedicated to you, which would be no different than you having a server sitting next to you like I do, only you have it sitting out in, we'll say, Arizona somewhere, or I'm in Indiana, so that's a long way. So it could be anywhere, it could be overseas, who knows? But that's a dedicated server, one machine dedicated to you. Those are usually the most expensive routes, usually $100 a month and up, and that's being pretty generous. I'd say it's probably more like $150 to $200 a month. Whereas you can get a virtual private server for much less, starting more in like the $20 to $30 a month range. And then a normal hosting account, like I said, is usually free. Some places are not usually free, but sometimes free. And anywhere from $4 a month to $20 a month, things like that. And I'll warn you right now, the free ones usually come with ads. And free accounts I would never use for anything professional, because you're probably going to have ads plastered all over your website that you cannot remove. That's kind of the trade-off for the free space. And one thing I always live by is that nothing is free. Although we do offer hosting for free for you guys to learn on, things like that. much space we have and how much donations we get, which as we get more donations and I can afford to continue to keep the server up, we'll open up more accounts. And that's an exception to my rule. That is totally free. You can have the account for a couple of months, as long as you're doing something on it. If I notice that it's been 3 months and you never touched it, then we'll cancel the account and give that space to somebody who wants to use it. Operating systems for servers really could be anything: Windows, Mac, Linux, like Ubuntu. That's all you really need. And what I'm getting at here is that building your own server is kind of easy. All you really need is a computer and an operating system, and the other tools you need can be easily downloaded from the internet. Server software, the most popular one I would say is Apache. Like I said, because it is free, it's well maintained, it's open source, it's just it's great. It does everything you need. It's a little more advanced if you need it to be, but people at a place or organization called Apache Friends, they offer a kind of install package called XAMPP, MAMP, LAMP. I believe all of it's now called just XAMPP. Whereas in the past, there was a Mac version, a Linux version, and a Windows version. I believe they're all kind of wrapped up into one package now, but I could be wrong. As far as having your own server at your own house, you need to think of things like what a static and a dynamic IP address is. Your ISP, your internet service, they give your router, will say, an IP address, and 9 times out of 10, if you're a normal consumer, you're getting a dynamic address, which means this address could change. This 1.10.200.5, we'll say, for instance, could change. It could change now, it could change in 5 minutes, it could change in 5 months, it could never change, who knows. I don't necessarily know how each ISP handles their dynamic IP addresses. The thing to remember, though, is that you could use that, set up a server and use that IP address to actually direct a domain name to it. Fubar.com can go to your computer's IP address and load up a web page just like you would see, just like any other web page. The problem is that because the IP address is dynamic, when it does change, and if it does change, your site will go down. If you have a static IP, you are buying a IP address that will never change. Usually, if you can even get your service provider to offer that service anymore, it's way more expensive. They generally only offer that to business clients, which business services with ISPs are more expensive anyway. Take it from someone who's owned their own business a few times, and I still do. I just work from home. So what's neat about it is, though, if you have a dynamic IP address, you can actually get something called an IP updater, which is a program that kind of runs in the background, and it checks to see if your IP address has changed, and if it has, it will go to a service such as DynDNS, which is a service I use, and that's the reason why I'm plugging them. And it will update their records to your new IP address. So, assuming everything is going correctly with DynDNS, there shouldn't be any downtime, and if there is, it's a couple seconds, who knows, I don't know, I've never seen any downtime. So, to recap with that, if you have a dynamic IP address, you can still get the functionality of a static IP address without spending all the money with your ISP. You can run a server from home, you sign up for DynDNS, which is free to an extent. It's free if you want to use some of their domain names or their subdomain names. Like, for instance, you could create johndoe.dinedns.org, and that redirects to the server on your computer, which is handy. But if you want to be a little more professional about it or a little more serious about it, you can opt for their another package, which is what I use. And at the moment, I believe it's $30 a year, where I can have my domain name pointed to my computer and have the IP address updater, monitor and update my IP address. So that's that. And just to kind of go over a little bit about domain names, which I've brought up a couple times. A domain name is really just a shortcut or a fancy alternative to the actual server's IP address. IP addresses are these digits, these numbers, and someone along the way realized that if we give many years ago, someone decided, I don't remember who, look it up, but decided that a domain name might be a little easier to remember than a series of numbers, which is interesting since we all remember phone numbers, or at least we used to before we had cell phones that remembered them for us. But either way, that's how we got to domain names, and not only is it easier to remember, but you can make a lot more money off of a name than a number. And that concludes this first lesson in our new series, Building a Dynamic Website from Start to Finish. I apologize it wasn't as interesting as the beginning of the other series. However, we'll start getting into the nitty-gritty very fast in this one. That's another reason why I decided I wanted to reboot the series and start from scratch, so we can hit the ground running and not worry as much about all the design elements we have already in place in the first series. So I look forward to continuing on with this, and though we've had some setbacks here with storms and stuff hitting the Midwest, I'm going to keep trying to get more videos out again. And like always, donations are very, 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 I can't stress it enough, welcome, as myself and my other programmer, we are working as freelance workers again, so when business isn't coming in, we still have to feed our family, and I want to keep making these videos for everybody. So those of you who have a little extra scratch, please feel free to donate a little to the account. It also helps us keep the hosting account going. So without that, with that shameless plug there, which I'll try to not bug you guys about too much, but I look forward to seeing you guys in lesson 2, and thanks again for everybody's interest and feedback, and we're going to try and keep these rolling again. I know I say that often, and sometimes I do and sometimes I don't, but hey, life happens. So we'll see you at lesson 2.